Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to dive deep into the very heart of how a business actually works. We're talking about its processes, the technology that powers everything, and the capacity that ultimately defines its limits. To make sense of it all, we're going to use a simple but really powerful analogy. So, let's get started. To really get this, just think about something we all know, a kitchen. The layout, the tools, the amount of counter space, every single detail has to be planned just right to make a great meal efficiently. Well, that's exactly what operations management is all about, and this kitchen idea is going to be our guide today. So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the absolute foundation, process planning. From there, we'll get into how to pick the right process, how to analyze the costs, and how to innovate. Then, we'll explore the huge role technology plays, and we'll wrap it all up by learning how to master capacity. Let's jump in.
First up, process planning and strategy. This is the bedrock, the foundation of everything. It's all about creating that fundamental game plan, the master blueprint for how any good or service actually gets made.
Okay, let's nail down 3 core concepts you see on this slide. First, what is a process? क्रियावलियाक्यानु निश्चित आदान लबागने एवं परिवर्तनयकार निश्चित प्रतिदान निर्माण करन अंतर संबंधित कार्यायन समूहयकी. In English, a process is basically a group of related tasks that takes specific inputs, works some magic on them, and creates specific outputs. Next up, process design. क्रियावली निर्माणयानु एम कार्यान एवा इदुकरण पुद्गलयान सह विविध संगवतान अतर फलदायी लेस संबंधीकरणय करणे खेजेदयान तीरणय किरीमाई. So in English, process design is really about figuring out how those tasks should be done and coordinated between all the different people and departments to be as effective as possible. And finally, process strategy. क्रियावली उपायमार्गयानु बांडा हा सेवा भौतिकव निष्पादनय करण संगवतामक अनुगमनय करण समस्त इहल मट्टमे प्रवेश्याय. In English, this is the big picture. Process strategy is a company's overall, high-level approach for physically making its stuff, its goods and services.
So when you're building a process strategy, it really boils down to 4 key decisions. First, capital intensity. Pragdana Thivratava Yanu, Nishpadana Kriyavalya Diyantra Sutra Saha Takshanaya Kopamana Brahmanyak Yodagana De Yanu, Saha Ministramaya Kopamana Brahmanyak Yodagana De Yanu Atar, Adyanapatyaye. In English, this is just the mix of equipment and technology versus actual human labor in your production process. Are you using more machines or more people? Second, process flexibility. Kriyavali namyatavayanu, veladimporle ilume, takshne, ho pavatana sampatwala villa sidwana veniscom velada pratakar bakfimasad ha nishpadana kriyavalia ketram pasuen veniskala hekediyanai. In English, this asks, how easily can you adjust your production process when things change, like when demand suddenly shifts or new tech comes out? Third, we have vertical integration. Siraseka batabayanu, samagamak tamasapliam dame, kopamana kodasak tamanswatava palane karne dalyanu, anam, amudravya nishpadane sita avasan nishpadane takwa kriyavalian kopamana pramaniak samagama wisanmiwa sithu karne de yanai. In English, vertical integration is about how much of your own supply chain you control. How many steps from raw materials to the final product do you actually own and operate yourself? And number 4, customer involvement. Pariboga kasahabagyatwa yanu, bandehil sevaya nirmanai kriyavaleda paribogakaya keteramduda da sambandakardagane de yanai. In English, this is pretty straightforward. It's the degree to which your customer is actively involved in the creation of the product or service.
This leads us right into the sourcing continuum, which just shows the different flavors of supply relationships. On one end, you've got an arm's-length relationship.
දුරස්ථ සම්බන්ධතාවයක් යනු සැපයුම්කරුවෙකු සමග කෙටිකාලීන කොන්ත්‍රාක්තුවක් හෝ එක්වරක් පමණක් සිදුවන ගනුදෙනුවකි. මෙහිදී සම්බන්ධතාවය ඉතා අවම මට්ටමක පවතී.
In English, an arm's-length relationship is basically a short-term contract or a one-time purchase. The interaction is minimal. Next up, a strategic alliance.
උපාය මාර්ගික සන්ධානයක් යනු සැපයුම්කරුවෙකු සමග දිගුකාලීන සහයෝගීතාවයෙන් යුතු සම්බන්ධතාවයකි. මෙහිදී දෙපාර්ශ්වයම එකිනෙකාගේ සාර්ථකත්වය සඳහා කැපවී ක්‍රියා කරයි.
In English, this is a much deeper connection. A strategic alliance is a long-term, collaborative relationship where both sides are really invested in each other's success. Then you have a joint venture.
ඒකාබද්ධ ව්‍යාපාරයක් යනු සමාගම් දෙකක් එක්ව නව ව්‍යාපාරයක් නිර්මාණය කර එහි අයිතිය සහ පාලනය බෙදාගන්නා හවුල්කාරීත්වයකි. In English, a joint venture is an equity partnership where two companies literally create a new business together, sharing ownership and control. And at the far end of the spectrum is full vertical integration. සිරස් ඒකාබද්ධතාවය අනුව සමාගමක් තම සැපයුම් දාමේ යම් අධියරක 100% හිමිකාරීත්වය ලබා ගන්නවා. In English, this is when a company takes 100% ownership of a stage in its supply chain. They do it all themselves.
All right, let's shift gears. Now that we have a strategy, we've got to select the right process. Think of this as choosing the perfect recipe. It's all about matching your production method to what your customers are actually asking for.
This table lays out the main process types really nicely, based on volume and variety. First, we have projects. Pyapratyanu paribogikekuge nishchita anomakata anuva nirmane karana advitiya ekvarak pamanak siduwana nishpadanayaki. Udaharanayak lesa nevaktenima. In English, projects are these unique, one-of-a-kind productions made for a specific customer. Think about building a massive ship. Next is batch production. Khandayam nishpadane yanum vividha nishpadana varga kuda khandayam vashen nishpadane kirimai. Bakeriyaka vividha varge pan saha cake nishpadane kirima mita udaharanayaki. In English, this is when you process a lot of different jobs in groups or batches. A bakery making all sorts of different breads and cakes is a perfect example. Then there's mass production. Mahaparimana nishpadane yanum sammata nishpadanayak ita vishala pramanayakin nishpadane kirimai. Motor rata karmantaya mita kadima udaharanayaki. In English, mass production is all about churning out huge volumes of a standard product for a mass market. Think cars. And finally, continuous production. Akhanda nishpadane yanu rasayanika dravya ho telvani ita ihela parimavakin yut venaskam nometi banda akhandava nishpadane kirimai. In English, this is for those super high-volume commodity products that almost never change, like chemicals or oil. The process just runs and runs.
Now, don't get me wrong, these high-volume methods are powerful, but they are not without their challenges. For mass production, Mahaparimana Nishpadana Sandaha Ihla Pragdana Ayojanayak Avashavanatara, Velanda Pore Vinaskam Volata Ikmanim Pratichara Dakvime Hekiawa Adui. In English, the big drawbacks are that it requires a massive capital investment, and it's not very responsive when demand suddenly changes. For continuous production, Akhanda Nishpadana Kriyavaliya Venaskarame Ita Apahasuvanatara Yam Doshyak Atiwohot Ehi Balapema Ita Pulul Sahaviadam Adika via Heka. In English, the main problems here are that the process is incredibly difficult to change, and if an error happens, it can have huge, costly ripple effects.
So how in the world do you actually choose between these processes? Well, that brings us to the money, the financial analysis. You have to be able to justify your choice with cold, hard numbers. And it all really comes down to this one crucial question. At what exact point does your operation actually start making money? To figure that out, we need to find the break-even point.
And believe it or not, this simple formula helps us find that magic number. It's for the break-even point. Samatulita lakshayanu, vyapareka mulu adayama, එහි මුළු පිරිවයට සමාන වන නිෂ්පාදන පරිමාමයි. මෙම ලක්ෂ්‍යයේදී ලාභයක් හෝ පාඩුවක් සිදු නොවේ. In English, the break-even point is the volume of production where your total revenue exactly equals your total cost. It's that sweet spot where you're not making a profit, but you're not losing money either. So, to calculate it, the volume, V, equals the fixed costs, C sub F, divided by the price per unit, P, minus the variable cost per unit, C sub V.
But what if you're trying to choose between two completely different processes? That's where this cool concept, the point of indifference, comes into play.
Udasina lakshayanu vikalpa nishpadana kriyavali dekaka mulu pirivaya samanavana nishpadana parimavai. Mema lakshiyata vada adu parimavakadi adu sthavara pirivayak sahita kriyavaliya vada labadayi ve, ඊට වඩා වැඩි පරිමාවකදී අඩු විචල්‍ය විරිවයක් සහිත ක්‍රියාවලිය වඩා ලාභදායී වේ.
In English, the point of indifference is the exact volume where the total costs of two different processes are identical. If you plan to produce less than that volume, you should pick the process with lower fixed costs. If you're going to produce more, you'll be better off with the process that has lower variable costs. It's a great decision-making tool.
So, once you've picked a process and it's up and running, is the job done? Not even close. The next critical step is all about continuous improvement, which happens through analysis and sometimes through some pretty radical innovation. A super fundamental tool for this is the process flowchart. ක්‍රියාවලි ප්‍රවාහ සටහනක් යනු ක්‍රියාවලියක පියවරයන් සංකේතාත්මකව පෙන්වන රූප සටහනකි. එහි ඇති සැබෑ බලය නම් එය මෙහෙයුම් වැනි ඵලදායී ක්‍රියාකාරකම් බෙම පරීක්ෂා කිරීම, ප්‍රවාහනය, ප්‍රමාදයන් සහ ගබඩා කිරීම වැනි ඵලදායී නොවන ක්‍රියාකාරකම්ද සිතියම් ගත කිරීමයි. මෙය අපතේ යන ස්ථාන හඳුනා ගැනීමට උපකාරී වේ. In English, a process flowchart is just a diagram that uses symbols to show the steps in a process.
But its real power is that it maps out everything, not just the productive activities like operations, but also the non-productive ones, things like inspection, transportation, delays, and storage. This makes it incredibly easy to see exactly where waste is hiding in your system.
Sometimes just making small tweaks isn't going to cut it. You need to completely reinvent the process from the ground up. This is what we call process innovation. Kriyavalina Vodpadane Yanu Sulu Verdianum Kirim Venuita, Vishala Perlikara Verdianum Kirim Labaganima Saha, Kriyavaliak Sampurnema Nawata Salasukirimai. Me radical Venasakmisa Kura Galapim Nove. In English, process innovation is the total redesign of a process, not for small improvements, but for massive breakthrough improvements. We're talking about radical change here, not just minor adjustments.
Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. We have to talk about the tools that make all of this modern operation stuff possible, technology. This is like choosing the right appliances and gadgets for our kitchen.
In operations, we can pretty much group technology into three main buckets. First up is product technology. Nishbaden taxia traiton, kadveni, nishbaden selasun nirmanier kerimito sa kaliman karmakimito, ababetsganamolam, athlad way. In English, product technology includes all the tools used to create and manage the actual designs of products, like CAD software. Second, we have process technology. Kriyavali taxiani, roborunveni, sachin nishbadenir kriyavalya sa sevasepayumi shala, babavitskaramolam way. In English, process technology refers to the tools used in the actual manufacturing and service delivery, things like robots and automated systems. And third, there's information technology. Torturu taxiani, ERP veni paddati harahala, mulusamagama purama tortoru kalamonagarne kirimisal yorigine. In English, this is all about managing information across the entire company using powerful systems like ERP.
Let's look at a key example from product technology, CAD, which stands for Computer-Aided Design. CAD Yanu, Nishpadna Salasum Electronikava Nirmaya Kirumeta, Venas Kirumeta, Saha Sannivedane Kirumeta Bhavita Karana, Takshanayai. Eya Atyavashenma Nishpadanayak Sandaha Digital Salasmak Nirmane Karai. In English, CAD is technology that's used to create, modify, and share product designs all electronically. It essentially creates the digital blueprint for a product.
And from the information technology side, a massive one is ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning. ERP yano, Vikunum saha mulya sita nishpadane saha manava sampadakwa, Vyavasayaka sieluma mulika kriyakarakam thani, ekabadda paddhitiyak tula kalamanakarana mrudukangiyaki. In English, ERP is this huge piece of software that manages all the core functions of an entire company. It integrates everything, sales, finance, production, HR, into one single unified system. It's a game changer.
Okay, we've made it to our final section. We have our process, we have our technology, but what are our limits? This is all about mastering production capacity, or, to stick with our analogy, it's about understanding the true size of our kitchen.
Let's define a few key capacity concepts. First, capacity itself. Daritavenu, nishchitakaleaktula, nishpadane kaleheki uparima pramaneyai. In English, capacity is simply the maximum capability you have to produce something over a given period of time. Next is the best operating level. Hondama mihiyum mattameyanu, ek ekakayak nishpadane kirimasandaha, yana piriveya abamavana darita mattamai. In English, the best operating level is the percentage of your capacity that you're using where your cost per unit is the absolute lowest. It's the sweet spot for efficiency. And finally, a really important strategic idea, the capacity cushion. Darita cushion yanu, anapekshita lese illuma ihalayamavani avastha sandaha rakshitayak lese pavatvaganeyana atirikta daritavai. In English, a capacity cushion is the amount of capacity you hold back in reserve, just in case you get an unexpected surge in demand. It's your safety net.
So, how does capacity relate to your costs? Well, it's through something we call economies of scale. Parimane arthikyauniyanu, nishpadana parimava varivanavita, x ekaka sandahayana piriveya aduvimai. Maknisadayat, stavra pirive vedi ekaka sankyavak pura bedi yana bevini. In English, economies of scale happen when your cost per unit goes down as your volume of output goes up. This happens because your fixed costs get spread over more and more units. But there's a catch. The opposite can also happen, which we call diseconomies of scale. Parimane akaryakshamatayanu nishpadana parimava nischita mattamak ikmavagiya vita vyakulatva ho nilatharivadiyavani hetunisa x ekakayak sandayana pirive nevata ihalayamai. In English, diseconomies of scale happen when you get too big. Beyond a certain point, the cost per unit actually starts to go back up, usually because of problems like confusion, complexity, or too much bureaucracy.
And that brings us right back to where we started, back to our kitchen. We've talked about the blueprint, the recipes, the tools, and the size of the kitchen itself. So I'll leave you with this final question to think about. If your business is a kitchen, do you have the right processes, the best technology, and the correct capacity to create your unique recipe for success?